On this edition of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, we take a trip down memory lane and give you some insight into the work we put into two recent historical stories. Welcome to episode 108 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. As the baseball season winds down, we've taken the opportunity to spend more time on stories from Alberta's past. We tend to sometimes go down rabbit holes and find some interesting stories that go beyond the game. Over the last couple of weeks, we highlighted a trip to Alberta for a Hollywood superstar and a New York Yankees legend, and we dove into the 1920 Western Canada League Championship Series that was called into question after one team coughed up what should have been an insurmountable series lead. To recap those stories and offer up a bit of insight into the work that goes on behind the scenes to get these stories to you, we welcome back our own Ian Wilson to the podcast. Ian, thanks for taking some time.
Joe, thank you very much for having me back.
Take us back to the summer of 1953. This is a fascinating one involving Marilyn Monroe and one Joltin Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah, that's one of my more preferred pieces to research and write. What a incredibly interesting time for baseball fans and movie fans, and a kind of a intersection of those worlds happening in Alberta and happening in the mountains. And basically, what happened was Joe DiMaggio at that time was dating Marilyn Monroe and had been dating her for a little over a year. And he, of course, makes a stop in Vancouver on his way to Calgary, and then later on to Banff and Jasper. Going through Vancouver, reporters ask him, "Hey, where are you headed, Joe? What's going on?" and that kind of thing. And why are you going to Alberta? And he says, "Oh, I'm going fishing." So obviously Alberta has very good fishing, but I think there's another big catch for him, waiting for him in Alberta in the form of Marilyn Monroe. And in the case of her situation, she was, just a really, for both of them, an interesting time in their lives. Joe was retired from baseball, had been for 2 years, had done broadcasting for a year, and then had kind of moved on from that. Marilyn's star, meanwhile, was just kind of rising. I believe she was about 26, 27 years old. She had just finished the movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, had come out in March, and that was very well received critically, and audiences loved it. And she's also behind the scenes. Her contract, she's on like a 7-picture deal, not being paid very well, and acting alongside people who are getting Hollywood actors who are getting paid very well. So she's kind of like, just like an underpaid athlete at the end of a sweetheart deal. They're not necessarily enthralled with the work she's doing and the pay that she's getting. And something that DiMaggio actually was very protective of her about. But in any event, she's coming out to Alberta to film A River of No Return, which was a Western, kind of a poorly written Western, also starring Robert Mitchum. And around the same time, there's 3 big Hollywood productions, movie productions happening in Alberta. One starring James Stewart, another starring Ladd, I forget his first name, but and so there's a lot going on here at this time. And like I said, Marilyn's star is just kind of starting to take off here. And of course, for Albertans and people in the Banff and Jasper area, they're, it's quite the coalescence of celebrity. And I always look at Marilyn specifically, and I think there's really only one other person in the world that has the kind of celebrity history that she does, and that's Elvis Presley.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't think, I was trying to think of a modern day equivalent of this couple's visit to Alberta. And the closest I could come up with, and I don't really think it's a great comparable, is A-Rod and J-Lo, in that Alex Rodriguez is this immense baseball star, and J-Lo is this immense entertainment celebrity. But, and with respect to their careers, They really weren't stars like this. A-Rod is not the respected individual. I think it's fair to say
Mm-hmm.
that the Yankee Clipper was. And, J-Lo, again, very accomplished actress and singer in her own right. I don't think she's going to be compared necessarily to Marilyn Monroe at any point.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if there's anybody in sport right now that might be as revered as DiMaggio, and I don't know if there's anybody really revered in the entertainment business that might be comparable to Marilyn right now. And so when you factor that back into play and then go, okay, now you need to find the power couple, those things are few and far between, it seems. So it's a really fascinating read. Now, was there the fan attention attached to this, or were they fairly secluded throughout their visit to Western Canada?
There were people that were kind of watching for them. DiMaggio himself was a very immensely private individual, and he at the time, one thing that was in the papers and was widely known is that he didn't want pictures of him and Marilyn together. Like, he didn't want people snapping photos of them together. He just was not comfortable with that, wanted to value his privacy. And it was really hard to get those. There were a couple magazine photographers who were sent out on assignment to shoot some pictures, mainly of Monroe, but did end up getting the couple as well. So one of those photographers was John Vachon, and there's a very good book called Marilyn, August 1953, and it's mainly the photos that Vachon took of Marilyn during her time here. So some of them included poses with Mounties, sitting in a canoe, pretending to be scared at this stuffed bear, like some really kitschy, cheesy shots. But there's also some shots of her in her cast. She got injured during the film shoot and was in a cast. So we got some candid shots of her just kind of hanging out by the pool, shots of her in her room. And of course, the big get for Vachon was getting intimate photos of DiMaggio and Marilyn in their hotel room. And I don't mean that in a crass way. I mean like just shots of them just kind of talking with each other and smiling and laughing together. And these kind of photos hadn't really emerged of the pair before. So it really was, when you look at those photos, they're really kind of heartwarming pictures of the couple. And of course, just being in those were taken at the Banff Springs Hotel, and just seeing the background and the nature in the area that we all as Albertans know is there. It was just a good pairing. But he there was one day before he had lined up this photo shoot that he was kind of sitting and waiting. He had been tipped off that there was a wheelchair outside Marilyn's door, so she was going to be going to the doctor and having a doctor's visit. So he's like, oh, great, I'll get a picture of DiMaggio and Marilyn. And he's kind of sitting there like a paparazzi, which was not really his method of photography. He wasn't one of those photographers. And he's got his camera in his lap and he's waiting. And sure enough, he sees Marilyn kind of get wheeled out. And then, true to his word, DiMaggio is keeping space and making sure he's not able to be photographed right next to her at that point, even though he wanted to make sure she got to her doctor's appointment as well. So yeah, some definitely some fan interest at that time, but obviously Marilyn Monroe, Playboy had not come out yet.
Right.
Marilyn Monroe was on the first cover of Playboy. That came out December of 1953, and which Joe wasn't too happy about. Very old-fashioned, of course. So she wasn't necessarily the sex symbol and the icon she later became, but she was well on her way to that.
Now, we didn't really get a sense as to, and I don't know if it's ever been written as to what Joe or Marilyn had to say about the month that they basically spent here, but Vachon went on record to say quite a few nice things about the Banff Springs Hotel, and a really fascinating quote that you wrote that was attributed to Vachon. He says, "I had to come to Banff to learn to really hate Hollywood." That's got to be a nice little pat on the back for our Rocky Mountain friends.
Yeah, I mean, he really did not like. So Vachon's background was very much journalistic and documentary style photos. So he is very accustomed to taking photos of people who are dirt poor and just people who had been through some real life, I guess. So he wasn't really like swept up by the Hollywood lifestyle and enamored with it. He was more aggravated that by all the handlers and all the people he had to go through to try and line something up. Oh, maybe I'll get this. And he also said in the book how Robert Mitchum. There's a picture of Robert Mitchum going fishing, and he was basically like, that guy's a jerk. Like, he did not like this guy. In the picture, he's holding this fish. Well, Mitchum didn't even catch the fish. Someone else had to go catch the fish for him, hand it to Mitchum, and it makes a nice photo, all of that. But so he just wasn't the type of guy to be like, ooh, yes, I get to be a part of this machinery. He wanted to take his photos, do his job, get good work done. And he was happy when he was able to do that, but he didn't want all the hassle that came from going to point A to B. And he also had some comments about, he had some things about the food that he didn't necessarily like there. And he loved the Rocky Mountains. He thought it was very picturesque and beautiful and liked the hotel. But, he didn't love the food. And he also was unimpressed with some of his American colleagues who were staying at the hotel and not necessarily being as polite as they could have been, I guess.
It's a great read. Go to albertadugoutstories.com for more on it. And you've done this a few different times, Ian, and I want to give our listeners a bit of insight into how we collect stories like this or how we even stumble upon them. And so for this story specifically, how is it that you went down this rabbit hole just to find out that Marilyn and Joe DiMaggio were here in our province?
Yeah, that's a good question. With this one, like, sometimes I just get in my head, hey, I wonder if, Satchel Paige ever came through here, or Babe Ruth, or all these big names that you're like,
Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson, and if so, why, and what were the circumstances? So I often think of it that way. And in this one, it was a little bit different because I knew, Marilyn's visit has been well documented. We knew about that, and so I started thinking, well, yeah, Marilyn was there. So did DiMaggio come out with her, and was he there because they knew that they obviously were an item, and so that's kind of what got it rolling, was more recognizing that Marilyn had been here, but trying to sort out how DiMaggio fit into all of that, and if he came out, how long he was out for, and he did stay quite a while, and he came up with a buddy, and they ended up encountering all kinds of nature, including deer and black bears and grizzly bears and that kind of thing. And he did actually go fishing as well. So true to his word. So it was more just kind of that. I knew about Marilyn, but I wanted to kind of zero in on DiMaggio. And at that point, you're just kind of going through some of the newspaper archives. And then in this case, there's a lot of books. This is kind of funny. So I had accrued all these mainly through secondhand stores, and this was well before the COVID outbreak, because I'd kind of been, how it goes. So, yeah, sometimes you have a story in your back pocket for months or years even. And this one, I'd kind of been gathering these biographies on Marilyn and DiMaggio that I could find. So it was, going through those books as well. And I knew about the Marilyn August 1953 book, and I was waiting to purchase that, which I eventually did. So it's just kind of sifting through those. And then the funny thing, as I'm writing the story and then putting the art in the story and the photos in the story, I was writing one day at my in-laws' house, and I was like, I feel like I need to warn you, I'm going to be looking at a lot of pictures of Marilyn Monroe this afternoon. So it's purely research, right? So just hoping they weren't like peeking over my shoulder at the wrong time, thinking, what's going on here? So yeah, so that was part of it too, was finding the photos that was a bit of work as well. Just finding the photos. I knew about the Vachon photos, and then I found another, I forget the photographer's name, but there was a photographer from another magazine who would come up and shot images as well. So tracking those down, it took a little bit of work online, but was able to find some good images that way. Of course, Marilyn Monroe is such a huge celebrity that there's so much fan websites and images and things like that devoted to her. So it's just kind of sifting through a volume of all of that and seeing what you can find.
And that's one of the challenges with these historical stories, isn't it? Is that it's not like you have a whole lot of people living still who would have, been covering the visit or would have been in the hotel while they were there, right? Like there's not a lot of one-on-one conversations that you can have. And so you are depending solely on the recollections that you find in books, in newspapers, in magazines that can be sometimes tough to find.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You are kind of, sometimes it's easier to sift through the files and not interview someone because sometimes people can be difficult or their memories can fail and that kind of thing. In this case, there were times where I'd find discrepancies in what was written in a book or what you'd find in a newspaper article and things like that. One of the things that happened when they were on their way, I believe it was from Jasper to Banff, there's a tanker truck that exploded ahead of them. Really dramatic, kind of movie style event.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was an eventful trip for them. And in this book passage that I read, it was a biography of DiMaggio. It mentioned, like it seemed like the driver was smoking and everything caught on fire and that kind of thing. And then he ran off into the woods. And then it says DiMaggio helped with the search. Well, it never mentions in the book, hey, was that guy all right? Like, did they find that guy? So eventually I was like, oh, I really want to close that loop off. So I did find out he was okay. He did suffer burns. He went to hospital and he was all right. But, there were a few things like that where you'd find things that were opposing. And again, with Marilyn, because her life, she was just such a huge celebrity. Everyone was interested in her sex life in particular and who she was dating and who she was married to and things like that. So you get very gossipy accounts of things that, you'd read anywhere from DiMaggio was just really protective of her to he was abusive to her. And so it was kind of hard to navigate that. And of course, it's 1953. Well, the attitudes then were this by no means is there should never be abuse in a relationship, but I'm just saying like the attitudes were far different then about sex and how people dress and how people conduct themselves in relationships. So, the way it seemed to me was that DiMaggio was fairly protective of her. The two did love each other, even though they did get divorced and they did kind of reunite a bit, but never got remarried or anything like that. But I think there was a genuine love and concern there. So, yeah, I mean, you're kind of sifting through some of those conflicting accounts and trying to make sure you're not, promoting something unhealthy as well.
Absolutely. Again, you can go to albertadugoutstories.com. That one is called Joltin, Joe Has Left and Gone Away. Wanted to touch briefly on another historical story that we've been working on, and we posted it a few days ago, and it's all about the 1920 Western Canada League final series. And just for a little bit of context on this one as well, because I was the one who kind of spearheaded this one, Ian, was in the last year we've talked a lot about the Black Sox scandal, and I was trying to find out whether or not there was an Alberta connection to it, and to which I have not been able to find it. But in the aftermath of the Black Sox scandal, and also one scandal involving the Pacific Coast League, I happened across something that had happened between the Calgary Broncos and the Regina Senators. It's a best-of-9 series. The Senators jump out to a 4-1 lead in the series, come back on by the Broncos, and they end up winning it all. And I thought, wow, that's kind of crazy. And so as part of what we do here with our social media stuff, trying to find on this date kind of stuff, I went going through those online spheres. Newspapers.com is a big one for us. Newspaperarchive.com is another big one for us. And as it turns out, it kind of sent me down this rabbit hole where there was a bit of a controversy surrounding the end result because the Broncos ended up winning that final Game 9, 17-0. How does that happen? And the outrage in Regina at that point led one writer apparently to say, you know what, maybe there's something going on here. And even the manager player, Bill Spees, said, well, maybe there's something, although he even admitted, I have no evidence to support this. It was a really fascinating read. Again, you can go to albertadugoutstories.com for that one. And I wanted to ask Ian because, I'm usually the one handling the interviews here. So you're the one that's on the other end having to listen to me here. So I want to know any questions that you had for me about that story specifically.
Yeah, I'm happy to turn the tables on you here, and I do. I think you're ready to publicly declare here right now that you can definitively say whether the series was thrown or not. Correct?
I am not in any way, shape, or form ready to make any kind of recommendation on that because it's so amazing to me how quiet it went after the fact. Because in the couple of days after the final horn was sounded, there was this outrage, and the newspaper, the Regina Leader-Post, is saying, hey, you know what, we need a full investigation. And they asked the president of the league and the vice president of the league and everybody, hey, are we going to get an investigation? Sure we are. We'll investigate it because if there's some concern about it, we should be looking into it. And then crickets. The only thing that makes me wonder if there was something more to it, and maybe Spees knew something a little more to it, is when he renewed his contract that November, he specifically said, I want to start with a clean slate on this team. And so he didn't bring, I don't think, anybody back from the 1920 Regina Senators to the 1921 Regina Senators, which makes me wonder if there was something afoot, but nothing that I have been able to find would really declare that there was anything below board. Because as mentioned, there were some accusations that were certainly flying around in the media sphere, in Regina specifically, saying they laid down, quote unquote, and whether or not they were in debt to the mob or whatever the case may be, like there was in other leagues, because there's a lot of controversy around baseball, period, during that era where games were being thrown. But it sounds to me like Regina was sort of the team was dismissive of some of these allegations because of the record crowd that showed up in Calgary for that Game 9. I think it was like 5,700 plus that showed up, and in a city that wasn't 1.4 million as it is today. That was basically everybody closed up shop, locked the doors to their home, and showed up to go see a baseball game. Like, it was standing room only, and even then the standing room was all gone, and they had fans lining the outfield fence kind of thing, and they had to make specific rules around the game. I could have gone into so much more detail about this story, but it was just something else to behold. And again, to my point that I made earlier on, it's not like we can get that firsthand account from someone who was actually in attendance, because let's be real, if somebody had some kind of memory of that, they'd have to be about 116 years old, because that was 100 years ago this month.
One thing that I was curious about as I was reading it, so the Black Sox scandal happened in 1919, so a year before this Calgary Bronx Regina possible scandal. And I wondered, were the events of 1919 something that either could have planted a seed in other baseball players' minds about throwing games and profiting from losing games, not just in that situation, but all over North America? Was that something that planted a seed for that? And then on the flip side, was that something that heightened the senses of the media to watching for that? So could that have influenced how they were covering some of these games, where they're all kind of like circling their box scores and jersey numbers and checking off, like Duvall's character in 8 Men Out, right? So I that had me curious whether there was some recency bias from the media of, oh, geez, they're all throwing these games now, or whether some players were like, that maybe we can make a buck or two.
Well, and beyond that is are there groups out there who are thinking, hey, maybe I can take advantage of these baseball players, much like what was going on with the Black Sox scandal, right? And so there's some really interesting side notes to it. And again, like, there was nothing super definitive outside of the Regina Leader Post. And I tried to find even the writers' names, and it's not like they have bylines like they have today when you go through the archives. And so there's that almost air of mystery surrounding even who was the writer. And the day or two after the championship game, the Calgary Herald archives show or seem to indicate that, hey, this is all something that was planted in the heads of everybody by the Regina Leader Post. They kind of said it's just the scribes out east, and there's nothing to it. Our boys did no wrong, kind of thing. And so it was fascinating to see how quickly it died off. And who knows whether or not there's something more to it. And you and I were texting after we published it and after you had read through it, and you said this would be kind of a fun one to try to dive even further on. And I'd imagine that it's going to involve reading virtually every single Calgary Herald and Regina Leader Post front to back, from about September 20th, 1920, all the way to opening day, maybe 2020, opening day 1922. Like even the 1921 season had a little bit of controversy to it because the Senators only lasted through mid part of August before they had to fold because of lack of fan support. And who's to say that wasn't created by maybe some more of the controversies that were surrounding baseball at the time?
Yeah, really interesting. Well, one thing I was hoping you could maybe shed some light on too is the rosters of that era. Like this wasn't, maybe let some of our listeners know about who was playing in these games, because you did have some former Major League Baseball talent on those rosters. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the fun part about it is that some of them had some of the best names ever, right? When Chicken Hawks is an actual name of a baseball player, and he is involved in it. Now, it was Nelson Chicken Hawks, but again, the nicknames from that era were so fantastic. And both teams, again, this was the cream of the crop. The Senators won the first, and the way that the playoffs were set up back then was you had a first half winner and a second half winner, and then they faced off in the league final. And so the first half was won by the Regina Senators. The second half was won by the Calgary Broncos. And actually, the Broncos were second in the first half, and the Senators were second in the second half. So when you look into the lead in to that series, both newspapers in both cities were saying this was the best of the best. This is the way it should have been. And part of it was because they were able to attract more of the major league caliber players to their rosters. So the Broncos had players like Milt Steengraaf and Chicken Hawks and Walt Cuckoo Christensen. I mean, the nicknames were fantastic. And then you had the Senators, who had arguably one of the best pitching staffs in the Western Canada League that year, led by Herman Paulette and Burt Whaling. I mean, these were a couple of guys who it wasn't like they had major careers. It's not like they were household names by any stretch, Hall of Fame careers, but they certainly had some very good talent who played a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years in the majors, or were about to as well. And so there's that back and forth. And even after that series, there were players who were scooped up by either major league teams or by semi-pro teams elsewhere so that they could play out their fall schedule or the following spring schedule. Because baseball was one of those things during those, and frankly, it was started in the early 1900s and went right through the 1950s, I think, was you had barnstorming. You had all these leagues and all these players who were looking to play baseball as long as possible through the course of the year. So they were willing to play winter league ball somewhere down south, and then they'd come up for spring somewhere, maybe in Florida, that kind of thing. And then they'd play as far north as they could go for the summer. And then maybe they even had some fall ball. So it was almost a year-round thing for some of these athletes. And again, when you have some of those names coming through, it drew some pretty big crowds because the quality of ball was that good.
There's something about those best of nine series that evoke some feelings of that era too.
Mm-hmm.
That is fun to look at. As soon as I kind of read Best of Nine, I'm like, okay, where's my popcorn? I'm sitting down. I'm reading about this. I want to tell me all about the 9 games. Yeah, tell
Mm-hmm.
me. I want to hear about every single one. And that was part of why I was asking about the box scores from them too, because I was like, I want to see those errors in the box
Yeah.
scores.
Oh,
Like that.
absolutely. Yeah, and it amazes me is just how and it's not posted on our story, but when you go to the archive, Calgary Herald and Regina Leader Post, is it's not just the box score and a quick game story. Like there was in some cases full pages worth of coverage to what happened, and you had almost a play-by-play that was given, because it wasn't like you had TV at that time. It wasn't like you had radio at that time. And so the newspaper was really the eyes and ears of the game for the fans who couldn't quite make it to the game or were in another market at the time. And so it was really fascinating to read how thorough both papers were in getting that information out there. And like you said, when you go through some of the box scores, and especially when you see the last few games there, because when you look at the scores, like I mentioned, 17-0 was the final score in that final game 9, but game 8 wasn't that much better either, to be honest, because the score there was 15-5 if memory serves me right, and the game before that was 11-3 for Calgary. So when Calgary won, they won big, and it was a part of it was because their bats were a lot of them were major league talent players. And so it was really fascinating to go through. And like you mentioned, there's quite a few errors that were attributed to it, and especially in the last few games again by Regina, and a lot of it was attributed to the fans and how they didn't say it up front, but you kind of got the sense that there was quite a bit of heckling and making fun of the Regina Senators while the games were going on.
Everybody loves a good Calgary Regina battle. That's what us out west, we just love that rivalry.
Very reminiscent of the Stampeders and the Rough Riders for sure. So again, you can go to albertadugoutstories.com for both of those stories. That one's called A Bronx Tale. And again, one of those things with both of these stories, we wanted to provide you maybe a longer conversation for the podcast this week, just between the two of us, because it's not like we have that firsthand account that we can share with someone else and be able to say, hey, what happened back then? Because everybody's passed away from there. And so got to give a shout out to those who have been able to provide pictures for us. The Glenbow Archives, for example, the City of Vancouver Archives were able to provide some for the Bronx Tale story. And I know that you had some pictures as well that you were able to obtain. And do you want to give any shout outs on that behalf?
Not really.
Okay.
I can't, just mainly because I can't remember where exactly they were. I know with Vachon's pictures themselves, we didn't end up publishing those because those cost quite a bit of money to get the rights to, and we like to be on the up and up as much as we can, obviously. So the other ones, I know that we were able to use them, but I don't remember off the top of my head what the source was. So and some of the photos that are out there online are actually ones that were personal photos that DiMaggio or Marilyn or their circle of friends took and had in their possession as well. So, so I mean, that's part of the challenge of hunting that down. And I would have loved to have shared more of Sean's pictures, but again, there was a price tag attached to that we were unable to do. But we did include a link to the book, and I would encourage people to buy the book because it is, if you're interested in that at all, there's some great photos of Marilyn in other settings, but also just the pictures of DiMaggio and some of the stories that, Vachon wrote home to his wife pretty much every day or every other day, doing it on Banff Springs stationery and that kind of thing. So it's a really, if you're at all interested in Alberta history and that kind of thing, it's a very insightful book. And that's called Marilyn, August 1953.
And from that standpoint, I think that is going to do it for our conversation, but I do want to thank Ian for all his hard work in digging up some of these archive stories, and I can say with definitive nature that you are working on a few other ones too.
Yeah, I got some fun stuff on the go. There's one story in particular that I think I teased a while back that I'm like, oh yeah, I should have that done in a month, and nope, I've been pushing that back. I do also want to give a shout out to one of our partners, The Scene, which picked up the Marilyn and Joe story and ran it in print form. That was their first issue. I also believe they are picking up your Bronx Tale piece and running it in their next issue. So look for that. It's I know it's circulating in the downtown area and in the Beltline area. So keep an eye out for The Scene. A great arts and entertainment publication and big supporters of ours and sharing our work and getting it out there. So I always love seeing my writing in print form as well. I'm old school that way. And I'm looking forward to reading yours in their next edition as well.
I don't know if I've ever had a piece that's ever been in a newspaper, so that'll be something different for me for sure. I'm looking forward to getting some ink on my fingertips before too long. So awesome stuff, Ian. We'll keep up the great work. And as always, thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Joe. Take care.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your provider of choice. You can listen in on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and Podbean. And if you can, leave us a rating and review to help spread the word about what we're up to. On that note, again, thank you for all of your support, no matter the platform, of Alberta Dugout Stories.